Welcome back, my friend. Please enjoy the show. Thank you.
Inside the mansion, people stood and watched 98-year-old Mr. Wrong on his deathbed as doctors arrived and informed everyone that Mr. Wrong might not survive. Suddenly, Mr. Lee opened the door and proudly walked towards the men, stating that Mr. Wrong's remaining lifespan was exactly 2 minutes and 9 seconds. The men turned around, puzzled about who he was and how he got in. Everyone was surprised and unsure what superpower it was, but Mr. Lee reassured Lee immediately appeared before Mr. Wrong's bed and introduced himself. Lee had received a message from his mother 10 days before suggesting that they quit their stressful jobs and buy a city house. He pretended to be a businessman, offering Mr. Wrong a desperately needed product. Lee believed Diamond Capital, the international financial metropolis, was too large for ordinary people, but he persisted in pursuit of his dream. Lee despised Diamond City and refused to live there. A panicked man rushes into him yelling, "I'm late." Lee reads the man's name, age, and lifespan furiously. He was killed by a car in 3 seconds, with 3 seconds remaining. People called the cops, but Lee couldn't move, realizing he predicted the man's death and questioning his sanity. Lee noticed his pocket watch. He clicked it without knowing how, and the rain stopped and everyone froze. Lee realized he had activated the time machine and could see people's remaining lives, and he desired to alter fate. He could also change people's lives by taking and giving time. Time passed after he clicked his watch, and he wondered how time was everything and how there was no life without it. Lee decided to become the villain by becoming a time trader and controlling everyone, especially the elites. Lee was riding his apartment on a cold, rainy night when his roommate Yang came in drenched and complaining about the weather. Yang thought Lee was attractive but dismissed him because of his adoption and low financial status. She returned to her room, unable to forget Lee's appearance and confidence. Lee sat on a park bench the next day, watching people on the street and thinking about his first customer. He considered the elderly and children and realized that working with them would be somewhat depressing, as life is truly the most valuable treasure. A man in a costume talking on his phone abruptly interrupted his thoughts. The man's boss appeared and reprimanded him for not working harder after he promised to buy his girlfriend an iPhone. Lee and the man, who was 21 years old and had 65 years to live, exchanged glances. Lee couldn't help but smile as he realized he was about to meet his first customer. The costumed man happily walked away after receiving a small payment. Lee followed him to a restaurant, sat across from him, and displayed his pocket watch, freezing time and people to demonstrate his skill. The man, startled, attempted to flee, but Lee politely introduced himself as a time merchant. Despite his eccentric appearance, Lee addressed the man by name, Zhang, and shared his information, explaining that Zhang would live a long life. Lee offered to buy a portion of Zhang's life, and despite his skepticism, Zhang inquired about the cost. Lee gave him a suitcase containing 3,000 yuan or $46,000 for a year. After a brief thought, Lee asked Zhang to sign a piece of paper if he wanted to proceed. Zhang considered the gifts he could give his girlfriend and the time he could save by working part-time or doing any job for money. "Yes, I'd like to sell it." He nervously signs Lee's contract. He dies, indicating that the transaction was successful. Lee encouraged the diners to keep going. He pays and gives Song his contact information if he wants to sell more of his life. He declines, citing that he lost a year, which upsets him. Lee ignored Zen's pitiful reasoning and placed the card on the table, explaining that he would need it. Lee walked around the city, thinking about his first successful transaction and observing others. He ate while looking for customers online. The internet's main topic was the Wrong family's second-generation family head's illness, with little time left, and its new generation's inability to succeed him. Lee was well aware that the Wrong family had been passed down for centuries, and that they were notorious for paying high taxes and enriching the country. Lee grinned as he heard the news and knew he'd have a new client that night. Lee offered to buy and extend Miss Wrong's lifetime wrongs as he lay dying. My eyes widened as he realized the significance of his life to the family. Lee reminded them that the lie had only lasted 10 minutes. Lee told one of the men that his time would cost $15.6 million, or 1/5 of the annual earnings of the Wrong family. Lee took out his pocket watch and showed 5 minutes left on the Wrong. Lee stared at it Wrong, waiting for a response, and his nephew begged Ron to hurry up and decide. Wrong lifted his hand and gasped alive. The nephew wanted to buy a 1-year lifespan, so he quickly pulled out a document asking Miss Wrong to sign it. Wrong was too weak to move, but the will for life gave him enough energy to sign the document at the last second. Suddenly, he felt a strong sensation, and a glowing light blinded everyone, and when old men Wrong recovered, Lee's gunman froze. After sprinting out of bed quickly, Mr. Wrong immediately instructed everyone to remain silent regarding the recent occurrences. When Wrong's nephew gave him a copy of the contract that Mr. Lee had left behind, Wrong immediately became adamant about the importance of strictly adhering to the terms of the agreement and promptly compensating the person by his side. He was lost in thought as he stood by the window, pondering the immense power that lay dormant within the enigma. He issued unequivocal instructions to his nephews, ordering them to initiate a friendship with the individual in question. He spent the remaining hours of the night atop a monumental structure, where he reflected on the value of his abilities to manipulate time and engage in trade. When Rong looked back on his decision to follow a temporal manipulator career path, he could see that it was his best option. Despite this, he was aware that his capacity to assist everyone would be restricted as the number of customers increased, which frustrated him. Therefore, he devised a brilliant plan, a club for people who want to live a long time. This exclusive establishment would bring together people from various social strata, including common folk, elites, and wealthy businessmen, with each individual being placed into one of 6 tiers based on the amount of money they spent within the club. Level 1 contributors, or those who gave millions of dollars, would be eligible to exchange 1 year of their lives for the chance to do so. Accordingly, Level 2 members could reclaim up to 3 years. Level 3 members could reclaim up to 5 years, and so on. He planned to turn the Longevity Club into an organization of unrivaled dread and intrigue, which would give him the ability to achieve unrivaled influence and renown on a global scale. In the end, his objective was to find an illustrious and victorious club whose name would be known all over the world. Lee believed hardworking people would be the most dependable and loyal employees. While walking, he was stopped by a taxi driver. Lee thought he appeared to be older. He was probably tired of working so hard to make ends meet. Because of his unusual demeanor, the taxi driver politely asked if he was a businessman as he sat down. Lee checked his phone and discovered that Mr. Rong had sent him $15 million, but the driver's phone rang before he could respond. The taxi driver became concerned and said he would rush to the hospital and ask Lee to exit. Lee instructed him to drive because he was also going to the hospital. The driver thanked him and mentioned his high school son, who needed tens of thousands of dollars to attend the prestigious university. He said it was embarrassing for both the child and himself to be unable to pay. Lee paused the clock, placed money on the back seat, and exited the vehicle. He noticed a wounded blonde man. The blonde man asked what he was looking at and dropped his medical report paper before leaving. Lee discovered Yang sleeping on the couch an hour later. He was annoyed that she had fallen asleep in the living room again, but he covered her with a blanket to make her more comfortable. When she awoke and asked what he was doing, Justice was about to cover her. Yang cut him off in his explanation and directed her to her room. He threw the blanket on the couch after she slammed the bedroom door. At his desk, Lee worked on his Longevity Club concept. After a few hours, he took a break, knowing that the club would soon form. Yang inquired why he was not getting ready for work the next day. Yang considered Lee a slacker who wanted to quit and go home. He shut the apartment door, sat in the chair, and declared that he no longer needed to work. Lee later checked in with a real estate consulting firm to see how things were going. Yang approached the consultant, taken aback. Lee came to look for a place to live because he knew she worked there. Yang couldn't believe what she was hearing and assumed he'd just been hired, so she asked Lee for his total budget before he responded. She informed her coworkers that she would speak with Lee. Yang mentioned his $70,000 house nervously. Lee smiled the entire time and commented on how old and small the house was, but Yang told him to stop joking because the houses she offered met his best criteria and he couldn't afford a villa with his income. Yang sent her friend back to deal with Lee because she didn't understand his confidence in sitting in the chair and claiming that the villa wasn't all that bad. Yang looked even better as her friend discussed the house contract with Lee. Ms. Lee was told to stop laughing because the 406 square meter unit costs $7 million. She dashed past Yang and called her boss, claiming to have sold the most expensive house in the neighborhood. Yang was skeptical, so he put off signing the contract. The boss demanded a deposit of $500,000, but Lee proudly stated that he paid directly. Yang couldn't believe Lee had been standing before her the entire time. Perhaps the taxi driver dialed Lee Lefty's number. Lee stated that the offer was still valid and the driver said they needed to meet again. He suggested they talk elsewhere the next day at the bus station. The driver stated that his father required surgery. He survived, but the ICU was costly. His relatives are avoiding him and pleading with him to stop taking out loans. He sobbed, said he needed money, and would go to any length to obtain it. Lee sipped his coffee and offered a large sum of money in exchange for his life. Lee demonstrated his ability to manage time and assured the taxi driver that his services were legal. He explained to the man that he was a merchant who bought and sold people's time. He then asked if he wanted to trade time for money and how much it would cost. For 1 year, Lee offered 3 times his annual salary. The driver immediately inquired whether he could sell 3 years of his life for $1,350,000. Lee stated that he had 10 years. After the man stated he had enough time to be a father, Lee instructed him to sign the contract. Lee wired the money after signing the contract. The driver footed his father's hospital bills. Lee felt the man's burden should be reduced now, but feared he'd regret it later. Later, the previous night's blonde drunkard threw a bottle next to Lee and told him he owed him money. Lee was attacked for laughing. According to the medical report, Lee predicted the man would die after a month. Lee instructed the junk band to follow him to safety. While following him, Lee inquired about his illness and family. Peng introduced himself as having leukemia. Lee claimed that he should be resting at home and that his family must be concerned, but Peng claimed that he left the house and told him to act dead. "I'm perfectly fine. Thanks." He was surprised by the positive response, so he sped up time 100 times to put the guy through his paces. Peng inquired as to why their surroundings had changed. Lee assured him that what he saw was real and that he had come in peace to extend his life in exchange for his loyalty and freedom. Peng inquired as to what would occur. Lee silently admired Peng's candor. Peng inquired about his siblings and parents and how he left the house to earn money for them before he died, so that he would not burden them. Unfortunately, his illness caused people to reject him, and he realized that selling himself might not be such a bad idea after all. Lee inquired if he had made a decision. Peng bowed as if accepting the offer, knowing he'd die either way. Lee extended his life by 100 days and restored his health. Lee inquired of Peng how it felt to be healthy once more. Peng realized Lee was serious and declared he would be his slave, obeying Lee's orders. Lee handed him a piece of paper and instructed him to clean up, dye his hair black, and report to the address. Lee looked down, told him to address him as master, and vanished. He needed more loyal subordinates after establishing the longevity club. Yang entered the apartment with a bottle of wine and appeared inebriated. When Lee entered the apartment, she realized she had prepared for that moment after learning about his wealth. Yang confronted Lee about the concealment of his identity. As she placed her finger on his lips, Lee asked calmly what she would do. As a punishment, Yang proposed 3 shots. Mrs. Yang tries to flirt with our protagonist using her experiences, but she fails. Lee could control the situation and throw her into her bed after gaining his powers. This soothes her. She apologizes, but Lee says that he likes cunning women like her, but that he has changed and that she will have to work harder to win him over. She was charged. Bros. Miss Yang ran out of her room the next day, saying she'd be late for work and had too much to drink the night before as our protagonist was working on something. Lee told her he would take care of it, help her take a day off from work today, and that she should stress properly. He suggests she cook for him as a way of saying thank you. He wonders how many people have such power at that time as she obeys. Peng walks in like a soldier, ready to take orders. Lee informs him that he no longer needs to address him as master, sir, and that this should suffice. Miss Yang is perplexed. Lee introduces the contract of cooperation he made for them and goes over the points of it, where one of the points is that How can list 3 things our protagonist can't make him do. Peng, How, without even reading the rest of the contract, quickly signs it and tosses it right before Lee, our protagonist, happy with Hao's trusting spirit, pronounces their cooperation official, and now they are a team. Lee gives him his first task. He needs to find the university student called Baron and hand him a piece of paper. How it takes the paper and reassuringly tells our protagonist to treat it as it's done. This makes Lee think of how great it is to have an assistant. It definitely makes things much easier, and if you want to make the longevity club, you won't be able to do it alone now. He starts thinking of other requirements for his club. You need to make a database of his customers, and he should also start preparing a venue for the club using his experience as a programmer. He'll just need to find some people to help him working on the app, and he's pretty confident he can do all of this. Now all the employees at Windsor Green, which is the strongest firewall system, were going over the security measures of the system. It gets infiltrated by someone. It turns out that night before, NCT was under attack from a computer virus attack. Never seen before in history, the government computer system for the stock exchange collapsed. According to the reports, financial losses of the country exceeded tens of billions. The report also says that the largest of the cyber attack was the computer laboratory of the University of the NCT. The hacker broke through Windsor Green, a supreme computer, and took the confidential data of the laboratory. The reports claim that if this data is lost, the damage to the future of the artificial intelligence would be too great, and psychologists claim for the available data of the hacker they gathered through his videos that he sent when he would hack the system, that the person that hacked the system is someone who doesn't have much time to live, also that his personality is that of someone that enjoys performing, and that he wants to create an event that will shake the world. Watching this, our protagonist realizes the potential opportunity, and then he calls Peng Ho to ask him to visit the wrong family. He wants to borrow some experts from them. In the next scene, we see a man in front of a bunch of computers violently coughing. We learn that he is the one behind the infiltration of Windsor Green's system, and that he's suffering from the deadly tumor. He doesn't have much time left. His intention is to cause the internet to collapse as he dies. Just as he was working on his plan, his firewall gets breached, and the hacker gets a message telling him that he won't die if he finds Mr. Lin. Hacker thinks this is just a bait, and he won't fall for it. but he gets another message telling him that he can be saved and that he should just give it a try. He gets an invite to a video call, which he accepts after giving it some thought. In the video, Lee sits casually and addresses the hacker by name. The hacker is taken aback that our protagonist knows his name, but he tells him he knows a lot more about him and projects the hacker's information in front of him with his finger. Lee gives him only 10 days to live. The hacker is baffled about how they discovered his location and other details, and he does not believe he has 10 days to live. Lee becomes solemn and tells him he is the only one who can give him more time. Our protagonist suggests that he use his computer skills to locate him in 10 days. The hacker is enraged, and just as he is about to ask Lee who he is, the video call terminates, leaving him perplexed and wondering if everything is a trap. Lee consults with a computer expert who assists him in contacting Robert. The hacker expert warns Lee that Robert is extremely skilled and could cause problems, but Lee assures him that a hacker, too, is human, and that all humans fear death. Robert is coughing and looking for our protagonist at the city airport. He asks an airport employee concerned about his large amount of luggage where he can find the location on his phone. Psalm complains at a laced mansion that he is weaker despite only being alive for a few days. This challenges our hero's abilities. The 100 days he lived beyond his expected lifespan did not affect the progression of the disease. He only has time control. Lee believes his medical knowledge is insufficient to solve such problems, but his power will work if he considers them a collection of cells. He instructs him to bring a precise microscope and a blood sample, and our protagonist tells him there will be a big surprise if his hypothesis works. Our time merchant is investigating time slowing. He believes that by applying this power to every cell, he can prolong life. He uses a microscope to look at cell lifespans. He believes that by slowing and spreading the 6 cells, he can slow time. He fled when the doors slam, thinking he was a thief. Robert threatens to post his naked body on the dark web if he doesn't leave. This piques his interest and leads him to the hacker. Our protagonist is impressed by his abilities, which he quickly discovers. Robert informs him that China is a major technological power and that he should learn Chinese. After Robert pretentiously asks Lee if he is the time merchant because he doesn't look special, they fight. Our protagonist then tests his hypothesis and discovers that if he can focus on the things he wants to manipulate, even sales, he can control their time, just as he did when he discovered the leukemia cells in-house. In the following scene, we see Robert jumping around with joy, wondering how something like this could exist, and his body is completely pain-free. Our protagonist treats him, and Robert grabs Lee's legs and praises him to the point of calling him a god. He is irritated by this behavior and tells him to treat Lee more respectfully and not speak to him so casually. Our protagonist, on the other hand, invites Robert to join his longevity club. Robert enthusiastically agrees to join the club and promises to follow him for the rest of his life. Lee then hands him the contract and tells him what he'll need his help with first. He'll need to create a database for all the talents in the world, focusing on those with weak bodies, weak parents, chronic illnesses, or the verge of death. After that, he tells him he should create another database for the wealthy, sorted by age, wealth, health, and other similar variables. He'll eventually need him to do something right. He requires him to develop messaging software that ensures complete confidentiality and privacy. Robert simply tells him it's a piece of cake and that he'll take care of it now at the wrong family's house. Mr. Wrong assures one of his men that Lee's abilities exist and that he is proof of it. At that moment, one of the security guards comes over with a package and informs Mr. Wrong that it was sent by a young man of about 20 years of age and is for him from Mr. Lee. Wrong wanted to open it right away after learning it was from Lee. When they opened it, they discovered a phone inside, and this place said Longevity Club on the phone. The other guy claims that the same guy gave him a piece of paper not long ago. Ron becomes enraged for not being informed of this earlier and orders him to read the letter immediately. The letter states that it is an invitation to the Longevity Club, and that the Longevity Club uses a ranking system for its members, and then explains the members' requirements at each level. The more points a member has, the higher he's ranked. Then the letter states that when upgrading to the next level, only half of the points can be purchased, and the other half must be obtained through completed missions assigned by the Longevity Club. As for the perks of membership, the letter explains that each level can exchange for a certain amount of time relative to their rank. Hence, the Longevity Club allows its members to exchange for lifespan. The man reading the letter claims that if he hadn't witnessed Mr. Lee's abilities in person, he would have never believed such a club existed. Wrong tells him to gather everyone and that they'll have an emergency meeting immediately. At the meeting, Mr. Wrong informs the attendees that he received an invitation from Mr. Lin about the Longevity Club. Other members of the Wrong family become concerned because they've all witnessed his powers and can't take him lightly. Mr. Wrong, the senior member of this family and the one with the most say, tells him that he has already made up his mind about it and that he doesn't want to delay the response to Mr. Lee if he wants to make a good impression on him. So it's his decision, so Senior Wrong clicks the option for accepting the membership, and Robert appears to enjoy this job, in which he is essentially role-playing different fake characters to fool Mr. Wrong into thinking this is all real. They discuss one of the members' ages to persuade Wrong about how old and established this organization is, and then they use one of the characters to give Wrong the so-called newcomer's mission. Character 2 tells Wrong that he should change his name to 129 because he is the 129th to join, and the chairman will send him his first newcomer's mission. It also states that completing this mission will earn him many points, that he will be officially accepted as a member of the Longevity Club, and that he will begin his journey to find happiness in life. If he is prepared, he can begin immediately. Mr. Wrong appears overwhelmed by everything as he stares at what he has just read. The Wrong family members now learn that Mr. Lee founded the Longevity Club for those seeking longevity. It has appeared many times throughout history under a different name. They are known as the Longevity Club in this era and has 3 missions that also guide the club's development. The first mission is to safeguard the planet, because, according to club information, the Earth will be the only place for humans to live. They cannot ignore it. The second mission is to advance technology, particularly space exploration technologies, which will allow club members to break free from Earth in search of a better world. And the third mission is to advance biology and human evolution. At that point, Mr. Wrong stops reading, realizing that some of these members are old, and it's possible that the lower the number in their name, the older they are. Even though their family has been around for at least 100 years, some club members have lived since the Ming Dynasty. Mr. Wrong begins to feel an overwhelming sense of reverence as he realizes that the experience and wealth accumulated by these individuals over the years must have already reached a terrifying level, and he cannot allow himself to insult any of them while thinking about all of this. The president of the club sends a message outlining the first mission. It says that the Longevity Club needs a meeting place that meets certain criteria and that Mr. Wrong should provide it for them, for which he can earn 500 points. When the family members read the mission details, they assumed it would be simple, but Mr. Wrong reminded them that a very powerful individual would observe them. They should complete the mission flawlessly and find a place that perfectly matches the requirements of the other end. Lee and Robert received a response from the incorrect family that they will do their best to complete the mission as soon as possible. Robert informs Lee that they took the bait, which was precisely what they desired. Our Thai merchant advises him not to get too comfortable and not to let their guard down if the Wrong family discovers their location. Robert assures him that it will not happen because he is very good at what he does, and our protagonist finds it very exciting to create a large organization personally. A few days later, they received a package from the Wrong family containing all the different meeting location options. A significant amount of effort was needed to locate these locations. After going through some of these options, our protagonist finds one that suits his preferences. It has an academic atmosphere, is located behind China's most prestigious universities. It also blends traditional and Western styles. Robert confirms that the location meets all these criteria, and they decide the scheduled meeting time. We see Mr. Wrong in front of the meeting location with his staff waiting for Lee's arrival at the appointed time. When our protagonist arrives, he apologizes for being late. This guy can control time, and he's late, bras. It would be the same if I were the best man who recaps channel, except I only recap an I'm. Now let's get back to the story. Praises after Lee and his guys discuss the place and how they can use it, the Wrong family staff tells them that if they are not satisfied with this one, they have another option. Now we see the Senior Wrong receiving a text on his phone telling him he passed the mission and received 100 bonus points for completing it as he did. Wrong is thrilled about this as well as the other members of the family after learning about the great news.